Hi, Razor.
Firstly, widely reported that you're for Lewis Hall at Chelsea. What can you say to us about the prospects there with that potential deal?
What can I say? Let's wait and see what happens today. He's a player that I like, very versatile, really good potential.
Going back to what you said to us last week when you talked about possibly needing to be creative, I think you said in the transfer window. Would it therefore be a loan deal that you're looking at with this one, or any other possible income?
Yes. Don't want to give you a one-word answer. Let me try and add to it. But yes, I think it is, yeah.
And you also said that you were hoping for one more player. So is that still the case, that it would be one more signing rather than this and potentially more?
Yeah, I think if we were able to bring a player in, that would be our transfer business concluded, unless there was injuries within our own players.
Moving on, I want to ask you about your strikers, your forward players, because against Aston Villa, Alexander Isak was electric and scored twice, could have had more. Then Callum Wilson comes on and scores and could have had another one himself.
Yeah.
How difficult was it, firstly, the decision not to play Isak but to leave Wilson on the bench?
Very difficult. I think that was one of those calls that I didn't look forward to making. Out of my love for Callum, really. My relationship with him is very strong. I've known him a long, long time, and he's been outstanding for me as a manager from the start of our journey together to now. I respect him. So yeah, to make those calls when you have to disappoint someone you love is very, very difficult. But I had to do what I had to do for the team. I had to make a call between one of those two players. And fortunately, the good thing is Alex performed really well, and so did Callum when he came on the pitch. And they both scored. I'm sure they would have both gone home happy to have got off the mark for the season. I think as a striker, you want that first goal as quickly as possible.
And that's obviously the right response from Callum Wilson, isn't it? But you would expect nothing less from him.
No, I'd expect nothing less from him because I know the character. But I also think you have to take a longer term vision of our season. We have games coming up during the months of September and especially Christmas, December, there's games all over the place. So we're not going to have a problem giving players opportunities. We need to keep rotating the team to keep everybody fresh. So, you know, Callum will play loads of games this season. I've got no doubt about that. He's got a huge part to play in our season.
And that competition there that you referred to, it clearly is getting the best out of both players, but you have the two of them, don't you? And I know others could possibly fill in there, but it's not as if they're competing with two or three other strikers, so that will mean that if one doesn't play, then surely the other one will, so those chances are there for them to start games.
Yeah, as I say, giving them games and opportunities isn't going to be a problem this season. They're both hugely important players. We do have a couple of other players that are versatile that could fill that position. It's important that we do have strength and depth. And I also have to compliment young Ben Parkinson and what he did during pre-season. I thought he performed really well when he played. He's a player that we really like as well behind the scenes.
Manchester City, they won the Super Cup on penalties the other night. Did you learn anything new from that match?
I wouldn't say I learnt anything new. I think it consolidated a lot of what I already thought. Manchester City are the standard bearers, really, and have been for a long time in the Premier League of where other teams need to get to. I saw a team hugely motivated to win, which is the biggest compliment I can pay the team off the back of the treble and everything that brings. They went into a tough game and were desperate to win. You could see their reactions afterwards. So this is a team that will not be complacent. They will be ready for us, I'm sure. So we expect a really good game.
And they are so good, and so good at home as well. And you've been there with Newcastle and with Bournemouth. Can you just talk to us generally and also with a view to this weekend about the psychology of going there? Because probably a lot of clubs would have maybe a negative mindset when they go away to Manchester City, but perhaps it's a bit different for this Newcastle team now.
Well, I think we want our players to go there with all the positive emotions that our season last year, our first game this season should bring. So we're looking at this game as an opportunity for us to be at our best. Yes, we have to concentrate on Manchester City's strengths, and we have to try and stop those. But we also have to be ourselves, and we can't change. We want to become a top team consistently in the Premier League, and I think to do that we have to have a clear identity ourselves and try and implement that on other teams.
Thank you. Keith?
Eddie, two of your new signings scored in their debuts last weekend, and Sandro Tonali was excellent from the first whistle, largely controlled the match in the second half. Can he go to somewhere like Man City tomorrow and control it like he did last weekend? Is he that good?
I think first and foremost, my expectations of Sandro will be that he implements what we need him to do. Controlling the game, look, we hope to be in a position to deliver that, but first and foremost we have to get all the basics right of the performance. So we have to be really good off the ball as we were last week against Aston Villa. I think that gave us the platform to then excel on the ball, especially later in the game. So I don't necessarily want to take his mind somewhere else other than making sure we as a team are where we need to be in all aspects of our play.
In terms of debuts, without you talking too much about last weekend, but in terms of debuts and the way he's fitted in, I guess you couldn't have asked for much more from a summer recruit from Italy. Yeah,
I think that the start's hugely important because I think it just settles everybody down, and that's why I say the importance of Callum and Alex scoring. They've got their goal, and hopefully that gets them in a really good place then to attack the rest of the season. I think for Sandro, there's that instant feeling of, and you could see when he scored, the emotion coming out, big move, great start, and then I think the rest of his performance followed that goal really, where he was excellent. So I think now he'll hopefully feel the love of the supporters. There'll be an instant connection between him and them, and that can only help him.
Behind the scenes, is he getting involved in the team spirit? There was at the start of the week there was a photo of him on social media, table booked in Wetherspoons for. I'm sure you wouldn't have missed that. That looked like it had all the hallmarks of Matt Ritchie. Maybe I'm being unfair there, but I mean, is that? I take it that's part of the sort of team morale, but behind the scenes at the moment.
Yeah, I'm not sure he was in there for team morale. I think he was in there for something to eat. So I think it was a very innocent situation, but obviously picked up by you guys. I did hear about it, but no, he's settled in really well, and he is part of the group. And as I said earlier, I think he's built some really good friendships, and he's got some really good relationships, which is important. Certainly, when you go into a new dressing room, you want to find people that you can identify with and get along with, and that certainly helps settle you on the football pitch as well.
He might end up going somewhere a bit nicer once he gets his English lessons.
Yeah, I don't know how Matt Ritchie's got the blame for that.
I don't know. I'm just putting two and two together and coming up with 5.
Poor Matty. Yeah, I'm not sure he booked it for
it. On a more sort of serious note, I know it probably wasn't serious, perhaps said by Jurgen Klopp at the weekend, but after their match last weekend, he said the new technical area rules. He said there's one club that it's going to affect more than others, and it's going to be Newcastle. Did you see that? What did you make of those comments?
I think I heard about them through various sources. Yeah, I think the rules do impact us slightly more than other teams, just because of how we've worked historically. And as I said, this hasn't been a new thing for me and Jason. This has been for, I've forgotten how many years I've been in management now, but for as long as I've been in management, that's how we've worked. So it's not something that we've just done. So I didn't find it too bad last week, I have to say. I think we, as I said pre-game, we dovetailed in and out the area. It worked, we talked. I wouldn't have noticed necessarily a big change from previously.
Yeah, and I know you've said in the past you don't want to be liked as a team. You want to be there, you want to compete, you want to sort of, I don't think you said get under people's skins, but do you feel like you maybe are as a club? Do you think you maybe are getting under other clubs' skin?
I don't know. I wouldn't know. We were just trying to do the best we can for Newcastle in every moment and every area. There's certainly the design from us isn't to annoy people. It's to try and win games and be successful. If that annoys other clubs, there's nothing we can do about that.
And just finally, I think the 3-3 against Man City last season, which was an unbelievable match to watch, kind of launched Newcastle in many people's minds because you went toe-to-toe with them. Could we see another game like that again tomorrow?
Well, that's the beauty of the game we're in. You never know what type of game it will be. I think it was an incredible game to watch. I have to say it was an elite game. I thought we played really well. I thought they did really well to come back from a difficult situation. I thought it was a high level game. I think tomorrow will be a high-level game between two really good teams. Whether it will be high-scoring or not, that's difficult to predict.
Thanks, Eddie. Thank you.
Go on.
Eddie, 8 o'clock on a Saturday night, slightly unusual. I know Pep Guardiola is not particularly happy about playing on Saturday, having been in Europe. Is that something that you can take advantage of, do you think?
No, I've been in this situation before. For me, there is no advantage in the sense that the quick turnaround in games. I've been on both sides, so when we've played and a lot of games in a short period of time, and you think maybe is that a weakness for us, and we've won games from that situation. We've also lost games in that situation. So I think it will just come down to how we perform on the day and how they perform on the day. I understand his the way he's thinking about it, but I don't think it'll have any relevance to the result.
And I think it was the end of last season I heard you say when you knew you were in the Champions League that in an ideal world, you'd like two sort of interchangeable 11s that can cope with so many more games. If you get this other signing in, do you think you're going to be close to having that?
Yeah, certainly be closer to having that. I think I've said many times there's no perfection. You're always looking at certain areas of and balance of the squad and go, maybe we could improve the balance there. But I think we're getting there. I think it's a lot stronger squad through the transfer windows that we've had. Touchwood, we continue to recruit well. It's probably the most important thing for any football club is their recruitment. And time will tell on that, how successful we've been, but certainly the early signs look very good.
And I don't know whether you've been watching the Women's World Cup, but obviously it's the final on Sunday. Tremendous achievement for the women to get that far, isn't it?
Yeah, it's amazing. I think I haven't seen too much of it because the times of the games have been when we've been here training. But I was at the Euro final and loved that experience. The atmosphere was an amazing thing. So I took my boys to the game and they loved it. That's one of their best memories. So I certainly hope they can do it and win the World Cup. It'd be off the back of the Euros and the World Cup. It'd be a remarkable achievement for a similar group of players and manager. So I wish them all the best.
And do you think that the success of the women can basically improve football generally, or the amount of people watching football, the sort of image and the profile of football?
100%. I've got no doubts about that. When you look at the people that I interact with on a daily basis at the training ground or around Newcastle, a lot of those people will be young girls who are Newcastle fans, and that's great to see. And I think a lot of that is down to the success of the women's team recently. So as I say, long may that continue, because I think we want it to be a game for everybody.
And just briefly, you mentioned Serena Wiegman. There's a lot of people now saying, could she be the first woman to take on a high-profile league job in the men's game? Do you think that's closer to becoming reality?
I think what I'd say to that is just look at the job she's done. I think it's been remarkable. I think she's very calm. I actually really enjoy watching her on the sideline. Never gets flustered, always calm. I'm looking at her thinking she's thinking and analysing what to do next. And that's a lot of the time when I'm watching games, I'm sort of trying to put myself in the manager's shoes. I think she's done an incredible job.
Thank you.
Sorry, Andy. Sorry. Morning, Andy. It's deemed, I read somewhere, the toughest statistical start on the fixture list for Newcastle United. How much are you and the players relishing that challenge of Villa, Manchester City, Liverpool, all back-to-back to kick off the season?
Yeah, and then add in Brighton. So I think that's how we're trying to approach it, as a challenge, as a really good way of starting the season, because I think we'll know instantly how good we are, how good we can be, what areas we need to improve. I think we'll be tested physically, tactically. So I think let's look at it as a positive. We've got a great start, which certainly helps our mood and the way we approach the next game. I think that always helps when you win. So far so good, but this is going to be the toughest test for us on Saturday.
Certainly some start to life in Newcastle for Sandro Tonali. Keith was referencing his restaurant choices. He's been unbelievable on the pitch. I saw his artwork dedicated towards him as well. Have you seen a player have a more eclectic, I think is the word, start to a club career as Sandro has?
I think for me it's very similar, feels very similar. It's very early days to Bruno's arrival here, where I think the supporters took to him straight away. Now, he took his time to get into the team. I blooded him into the team slowly, And I felt that was the right way to treat Bruno at that time, and also we were winning, so that made that process easier from my perspective. I know Bruno was really keen to play straight away. Now Sandro's situation's been different. He's played the first game, but I think that relationship with the supporters, I hope, will take on a similar feeling for the player, because I've experienced that myself, where you get the love of the supporters straight away. It does elevate you to a place where you're not sure you could get to without that. So hopefully that'll be the same for Sandro.
You talk about the kind of the adulation of the supporters. Is this something that Dan mentioned to prospective signings when you're talking to them ahead of coming to Newcastle? Do you talk to them about the almost hero worship that the players enjoy?
Absolutely. I think it's a unique part of this football club is the way the supporters take to their players they love. Now, there's no guarantee that will be the case. So you have to earn that. It's not just given to you. You could be a big name, a big transfer fee, but it's actually what you do on the pitch. And I think it's what you give off to the supporters when you play creates that bond. So for me, when Bruno came, he was really respectful of the club and the history and the position that we were in, and he fought. First and foremost, there was that fight in him to help us stay in the league, and I think everyone saw that creative player fighting for the club. I think that's why that bond was formed, and hopefully the same for Sandro. I think he has to first and foremost work, and that everyone will see that that work rate and that desire, and then the ability will come on top.
Talking of hero worship, I asked you, I think it was around about this time last year, that a supporter had Joe Linton's face tattooed on it. You know where this is going?
I think I might,
saw
yeah.
a report that a bloke had your face tattooed on him this week. What are your kind of thoughts on that?
Lucky guy.
His calf.
I don't know quite what to make of that. I think it's an amazing thing, because that's a permanent. But it doesn't have to be permanent these days. You could get rid of it, I suppose, at some stage. But for him to have done that is an amazing thing. I don't take it lightly. I have seen it actually, so I know the picture you're talking about. I don't look too bad, so I was quite happy with it, and I hope he's not disappointed with it.
It's good representation. On the football, you said team news-wise last week that you had 5 or 6 difficult decisions to make. How are things looking team news-wise? How many decisions have you got to make this week, would you say?
Yeah, I still have decisions to make, because I'm not necessarily the type of manager that will look at a winning team and then automatically go, because we've won, we're going to pick the same team. For me, it's always around, what will this game be like? Do we need a different way of playing here? So I'll always analyse the game that way. I might end up picking the same team, I might not, but I'll always look at it independently.
And just finally, given Newcastle's form coming into this, given we've talked about Manchester City in Europe in midweek, a couple of injury concerns for them. We know Newcastle's record at Manchester City hasn't been great over the years. Is this perhaps the most optimistic any Newcastle United fan, given all those factors, should be going into Saturday's game?
I always want them optimistic. I don't know whether it's the most they should be, but I want a positive mindset, not just from the supporters, but from the players. And let's see what we can do.
Thanks, Ian.
Simon at the back.
Possibly what you said there, any positive mindset. I just wondered if you and the squad will feel any different when you get off the bus going into this game this season, given the success of the growth last season. I'm not talking about overconfidence or anything like that, but do you think you might have a more positive spring in your step just through what you've been through the last 12 months?
Yeah, I always think I have a positive spring when I step off the bus, unless people show me differently. And I urge the players to feel that way regardless of where we're playing. I do get your question, but I think that positivity has to come week in, week out, regardless of where we're playing. I think that comes with the territory of being a team that expects to win, and that's not saying that we will win, but you have to go into every game expecting that. And certainly that's the message I try and drill home.
Damien, you spoke about, I think, earlier, that the role of striker here is a big one, carries a heavy weight, but he seems to have grown into that since in his time here.
Yeah, I think he's coped with the move really, really well. I think especially when you consider he had an injury early on, which was a hugely frustrating period for him, because he was determined to try and do well and show everyone how good he was. And he had to wait a little bit of time after a really good first initial impression. But I think he's dealt with the move, the price tag, everything that comes with that. Sometimes can weigh heavy. I don't get that feeling with Alex. I think he's taken it all in his stride. It might have helped him that he'd had a couple of moves previously to before coming here, so he had that experience of doing that in different countries, which don't underestimate how difficult that can be. So it wasn't his first big move, but he's performing really well, and he has done through pre-season. So I'm hopeful he'll have a great season.
I know this isn't down to you, but how comfortable are you with the announcement that the Saudi national team is going to play at St James's next month?
Yeah, well, I found out like you, the media did. I had no pre-knowledge of what was happening. All I say on that is I think Newcastle is an incredible venue to play, not just football, but we've had bands, lots of different, rugby, lots of different people, sports at the stadium, and it is a truly iconic place to play.
Jacob? Just to follow up to Damien's question there, you've spoken about kind of how FFP has been limiting Newcastle before. Are these sorts of commercial opportunities things which Newcastle are having to do in order to expand that horizon, these sorts of events, the byproduct? Yeah,
possibly. I don't know any of the details behind how we've got to this point of the game taking place. So whether it's a financial decision, possibly that might have come into it for sure.
And just in terms of, there's been unease obviously from Newcastle fans as well as wider. Can you empathise with that at all?
To be honest, I haven't really given it too much thought because of how busy my schedule's been. As I said, I found out like you guys did in the media. I had no pre-knowledge of it, and I very quickly moved on to Manchester City.
Jordan?
You mentioned earlier about if you sign this other player, it'll probably signal your transfer business. Looking at your transfer business, would you say it was a very good window, or would you have liked more? I think that's very difficult to make a sort of a sweeping statement on the window, because I think you make a decision. You give an opinion at that point, but you might feel differently a year afterwards. And I always think when you sign players, everyone will go, "Oh, what a great signing! They haven't even seen him play yet." So time will always be the deciding factor on how good your recruitment's been. So when you look back to historically on some of our signings to this point, and even go back to my Bournemouth days, there were some players that I signed, people go make an instant decision and go, he was a poor signing, and 2 years later they're going, actually, he's a very good signing. So time's the only indicator of that. As I feel now, I think it's been a good window. But really it's 1 or 2 years down the line that you can give a true assessment of it. And keep going back to sort of the strength of depth. Do you feel you've got that now in many positions?
Yeah, I feel we're getting there. Yeah, I do. I mean, I think this season we won't feel the real effects of the games until, as I said, September, October, November, December. They're probably going to be the key months for us. And I think it will surprise some of the players how intense physically what that's going to do to us. So we're going to need the depth, 100%. And we're going to need to try and keep as many players fit and injury-free as possible. So this is going to be a real test of our resources. That's why I feel we need the strongest squad possible, and I feel we're getting there.
And just on Pep's comments, do you sort of almost sympathise with him when he's talking about how tight the schedule is, because you're going to feel that in a couple of months when the Champions League kicks off?
Well, absolutely, especially as they were the only team playing this midweek. But we'd love that problem ourselves, because they've won, the Champions League, the ultimate competition to win. So I do feel for him in the sense that the scheduling, but there's nothing we can do about that.
Thank you.
Tom Scott, you touched on it before, but Alexander Isak, almost a year ago, club record signing. Looking at the sort of transfer fees that get knocked around these days, does it almost look like a bargain signing in hindsight?
Well, I think with transfer fees, it's always, again, time gives a different perspective. So at the time, I think there was probably a feeling that it was heavy, the transfer fee. And then time sort of gives a different perspective, because transfer fees continue to rise, and some of the fees paid this summer have been extraordinary. And I think that as long as I think the revenue's in football, that will continue to be the case. And then you look back to deals done sort of a year ago, 2 years in, and you go, wow, that was a great price. We got that player at a really good fee. As long as we keep feeling that, we know we're doing the right things and making the right decisions. But there's no guarantee with recruitment. It is so difficult to get it right.
Yeah, and looking ahead to Man City, are there any fresh injury concerns at all, or any players who could be returning from injury?
I don't think we've got anyone returning from injury off the top of my head. And the majority of the squad, I think, are in a good place.
Lee?
Eddie, looking at the signings you've made, a couple of them are young players. Are you building a team for both today and tomorrow almost at the moment?
I think you're always doing that, Lee, to be honest. I think there's always a part of me that looks at the here and now, and we need players for the here and now, for sure. But we also need to be mindful of the future and make sure we prepare Newcastle as good as we can for the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years. It's always about a mixture. I've said this before. It's always about getting the right balance in the squad. You need some really good experienced players who have been there, seen it and done it and can help educate everybody else. You need players that are supposedly in their prime years, and then you need the emerging players that are snapping at the heels of everybody, desperate to play. So I think at the moment we have a really good mix.
Yeah, and Man City, in the past, Newcastle have gone there and sort of parked the bus. Seville the other night sat back. I don't get the feeling you're going to do that. I feel you might try and go toe-to-toe with them a little bit.
Well, I think it's about being ourselves, for one,
Yeah.
but it's about being competitive in the game. So we won't be reckless, we won't be silly, or we'll try not to be. But we'll try and find a way to get the balance right to being, as I say, in the game and making sure that Manchester City are aware of us in the match. I don't think we can be a team that sits deep the whole game. That's not how I want to build a team. So yeah, we'll have to get the balance right.
And just finally, I mean, being top of the league, it is only one game, but it's a nice taste and one you might want to get used to, I suppose, without getting carried away. It's something it's not a bad habit, is it?
Certainly, if you could guarantee we stay there, that would be amazing. But I think I actually haven't seen the league table. Genuinely, I haven't since the Aston Villa game. I might have a quick look before we start training.
Tom Shaw.
Eddie, last year Dan Burn told us when Sven came in that he told you that he'd back himself regardless of who you brought in. Have you had a conversation with him all this summer about bringing in a left back, strengthening that left back? Your thoughts for him, his challenge going forward?
No, I don't think that's something I've ever really done, in the sense of sit down when you sign a player, regardless of position, that you sit down with that player who's currently holding the shirt. I think it's obvious that if they continue to perform well and the team's successful, they will keep their place. But they will be aware of added competition, and that's what you want. You want the players thinking, if I have a bad game, I could be replaced. I think that's a really healthy thing for a player to think, because the other version is, doesn't really matter how I play, I'm going to stay in the team. That's not healthy for anybody. So we want a team that's constantly pushing each other for better performances.
There's been some Celtic links with Ryan Fraser. Is anything close to being resolved there with Ryan?
Not that I know of.
And what about your players exits wise? I know you've said if one more player comes in, that'll be likely be you done with players coming in. Still hopeful of moving a few players out before we
out of the current group we have, I wouldn't imagine too much movement. I'm discounting the players that aren't currently training with us, but never say never. Let's wait and see.
Martin?
As a coach, Eddie, your first game, I think it was at Arsenal when you were on the sidelines. Not necessarily just in terms of the personnel, but in terms of style, intensity and belief in 21 months. How much has the team changed that you will take to Man City?
Just trying to think back to that game. Seems a long time ago now. I remember it being a difficult game, but I do remember we were competitive and the lads gave their all, which at the time I'd never criticised that team. That team was magnificent for me in staying in the division. But there were difficult moments because I think we were just getting to grips with what we wanted to do. We were trying to give the players a lot of new information, and ultimately on the day Arsenal were too good for us. But I think we have evolved. I think we have changed. I think we're in a better place now.
And you've signed players like Sandro Tonali and Bruno Gomes, technically very good. In the evolution of a top team, how important is ball retention and how you look after the ball and how you use it to compete at the top?
Yeah, I think it's fundamentally important. I think if you don't have the ball for long periods of time, I don't think you can be a good team, a top team. Like, we need to have players that want the ball in all situations, that can handle the ball under pressure or no pressure. And we, as a team, we have to be comfortable in possession. And that's something we're working towards improving, I think.
So not meant to be disrespectful to the first team, but is the team now, does it give you more confidence going into these games that it can compete at that level?
All I'd say is that there's different ways to win. You don't have to go for total ball domination to win a match. certainly when you play against Manchester City, you know that's not going to happen really. You're going to have spells in the game where you don't have the ball, but you can still find a way to win when you don't have the ball. So I'm totally okay with that. But I think longer term, we need to try and still improve our ability to keep the ball for longer.
And did you see that against Villa, or did you see signs of that against Arsenal?
Yeah, I think it's a work in progress. It's not something I'm absolutely obsessed with. Possession of the ball for me is something that we want, but I still prefer attacking actions over ball possession. I want us to score goals, create chances. That's still my number one. And then if you can have the ball at the same time while doing that, like I'm talking over a longer period of time, then even better.
Mark?
Eddie, Man City on Saturday gives you the opportunity to kind of show your credentials against one of the top teams. If you win, people might start talking about you in terms of winning something this season. Would you be confident, or would you be comfortable being in that conversation amongst title contenders? Because you've certainly not been shying away from kind of expectations and wanting to dream and things like that.
Yeah, I wouldn't be. You won't be getting any comments in terms of towards that from me today. But I just think we're just taking it small steps. We're taking it. Can we compete tomorrow? Can we win the game? That there always are expectations. That's what we're trying to instill in the players, and they've been absolutely brilliant in their work. Coming back pre-season, I can see a group that's really motivated to do well. So that's all we look to continue.
And the mentality seems to have shifted at this club from 12 months ago, where it was, we'll just try and do as well as we can. Now there seems to be kind of, it feels like it's moving towards that level of being an elite club, which is where you want it to be. Do you feel that?
Yes, I think that's what we want to be, but you still have to prove it on the pitch. Like me saying it now is great, but it doesn't really mean anything. It's going to come from the players inside the squad, our culture of how we train every day. It comes from there really. These are just words, but that's what we're trying to be. But time will tell whether we are.
And just finally, everybody talks about Sandro. Harvey Barnes was absolutely outstanding on his debut as well. Are you just pleased with his kind of first contribution as Sandro?
Yeah, absolutely. I think again it was a difficult call with Harvey and Anthony. I thought they both did really well. Anthony did well from the start and created the first goal, and then Harvey came on and looked devastatingly quick and a real player who can deliver in terms of goals. That's 3 goals now in 2 games for him, so delighted with his start as well.
Just quickly to finish, Kieran.
Ed, have you been surprised that a rival's been willing to do business with you in Chelsea?
Yeah, I don't necessarily sort of see it that way. I think that they have their own decisions to make. They've obviously made a decision, or potentially made a decision. Until the deal's done, it's difficult to say. Potentially made a decision which is in their best interest, and we've made a decision in our best interest. I've not really given the whole situation sort of the thought like the question.
I think for your last 5 years, both windows rather, in English and 25 and under. Very obvious point. What's the advantage of bringing in players like that who know the culture and who are, I suppose, coachable as well?
I think there's advantages and disadvantages to every signing and every profile of a player. I think the obvious advantages if you're signing young is just the potential and is the coachability. And hopefully you have them then for the future, and you can mould and develop the players as around your style and your philosophy. The obvious one is if they're British based, is you don't have a huge transition period. There's no language barrier, and those things are important as well. But it doesn't mean you can't go the other way and sign young foreign players. Are certainly something we're aware of, and we monitor every situation individually.